Hello, listener. The show hasn't started yet. I just want to get a quick word in before we begin talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If, like anyone in the developed world, you're a fan of Star Wars, you've probably already seen Star Wars: The Force Awakens. And we've recorded a very special episode for you, which is available at howtosurviveshow.com. howtosurviveshow.com. Head over now to howtosurviveshow.com and you can listen to it yourself. For the time being, we're only going to release this on the website, so that's the only way you're going to hear it. So if you want to hear me and Chris talk about Kylo Ren and Rey and Finn and BB-8, then that's the only place you're going to hear it. howtosurviveshow.com. Thanks very much. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to episode 22 of the How to Survive podcast. This week we're covering a classic slasher film. It's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it is, of course, the original 1974 Tobe Hooper version rather than the more recent remake. I'm Chris, and joining me as ever is Joe.
Hello.
So start your engines. So as ever on the podcast we won't be worrying about spoilers.
No.
So if you haven't seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, now's your chance to pause the podcast and go watch it. So let's dive straight in. The film opens with a sort of quite creepy montage of Polaroid photos of body parts and things like that.
Animal body parts, though, I think.
It's I think some of them are ambiguous, right. But there's also news reports being played over of grave robbery
and other unpleasant things, but predominantly
taking place in Texas. And because of that, a group is on a road trip to check their grandfather's grave to check that it hasn't been desecrated and his remains removed, following this spate of grave robberies. They get to the graveyard and everything is in order, and so on the way back they decide to check out the family homestead and stop off there. It's obviously in a state of disrepair. On the way to the homestead, they encounter a sort of creepy hitchhiker character who cuts himself on the hand and then cuts Franklin, one of the group who's confined to a wheelchair. And then they kick him out and drive on. By the time they finally get to the family home, they have run out of petrol and the local petrol station has none, so they decide to wait it out there basically until the petrol gets delivered later that day. While they're waiting, two members of the party, Kirk and Pam, decide to explore the surrounding area and come across a nearby house which appears to be empty. Kirk goes inside but is suddenly set upon by a huge hulking figure and bludgeoned to death very quickly and suddenly. Pam goes in to look for Kirk and discovers a room where loads of furniture is made from what looks like human remains, and tries to run away when the figure appears again, but he grabs her and impales her on a meat hook before cutting Kirk apart with a chainsaw. Meanwhile, back at the van, Jerry, another member of the party, decides to go look for the missing members and comes across the same house and goes inside, where he too is set upon by the hulking brute.
Who, by this time, has established something of a modus operandi in that he, without blinking, will kill anyone who comes into his house, basically.
Basically, yeah. It's clear that he's hiding a terrible secret, Jay.
What could it be?
Yeah. The figure is, of course, Leatherface, who we see in detail now, is a man, huge brute of a man wearing a mask made out of human skin that is sewn around his face.
Yes.
Back at the van, Sally is about to set off to look for the missing party members when Franklin, who, as I said before, is confined to a wheelchair, asks to come with her. She pushes him through the undergrowth with some difficulty.
Yeah, in the middle of the night as well.
In the middle of the night, when out of the darkness, Leatherface appears with his chainsaw, carves Franklin up. Sally flees back to the gas station that she went to previously, and the owner doesn't seem quite as panicked as she is, and of course it turns out that he is in cahoots with, or perhaps a member of, the Leatherface family.
Yeah, is that Mr. Leatherface?
Mr. and Mrs. Leatherface and their children, yeah. And he kidnaps Sally and they end up back at the house. She's tied to a chair and forced to endure a sort of horrifying dinner.
Yeah. Spectacle.
Yeah.
Including, they first start by feeding the grandfather of the family by cutting open her finger, and then he drinks her blood. and that seems to be enough to sustain him for a few hours more at least.
Then they decide they're going to let the grandfather figure have the honour of killing Sally himself, because he used to be the best killer in the slaughterhouse. There's a theme of slaughterhouses running through the film. And he's too weak to lift the hammer himself. And in the confusion, Sally manages to escape, leaps out of a window in the house and makes a run for it. She gets to a road in being chased by the hitchhiker, who is Leatherface's brother, and Leatherface himself. The hitchhiker is run over by the articulated lorry that comes out of nowhere. And then Leatherface chases after Sally, who manages to climb into the back of a pickup truck and escape. And Leatherface is left in the middle of the road, shaking with anger.
And doing a weird kind of ritualistic dance with his chainsaw.
Yeah, well, he's sort of swinging his chainsaw around in frustration, and Sally is in the back of the pickup truck, again, like last week, alternating between screaming and laughing hysterically.
Yeah. Yes.
So interesting links between this week's and last week's films.
Yeah.
So that's where the film ends. And so it's partially inspired by the Ed Gein murders.
Sure.
He killed 2 women, but also dug up a number of bodies and desecrated corpses.
Yeah. And wore them as skin.
Yeah, and made furniture out of them and all sorts of things.
Very Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, and it's a quite effective and quite frightening horror film.
Yeah.
Especially considering its age. I mean, a lot of the time...
Take it with a pinch of salt, because obviously the general terror is a bit subdued by the fact that it's dated a bit, but if you take it with a pinch of salt, it still is chilling.
Yeah, and it's obviously the idea in itself is pretty terrifying, but also I think it's a very cold and very brutal film, and like the execution of it all is quite.
What I like about it is, say last week it was Friday the 13th, which seems to be about blunders and sexcapades. This is about raw insanity. Yeah, it's kind of like it's not really hillbilly horror, because
I guess it kind of was. It's certainly painting like a really unflattering portrait of sort of rural America, isn't it, and the people who live there.
But yeah, I guess you could call it a hillbilly horror then. But it's also a slasher. But I think it's early enough in the genre that it doesn't really have any of those tropes. Yeah, perhaps because it started some of them, but certainly because they hadn't established themselves yet. So that's not built into the framework of the movie, which makes it that much more. It feels original.
Yeah, like you feel. I think it doesn't. I don't think it's aged as badly as things like Friday the 13th.
No,
certainly not. Anyway, but so you enjoyed the film generally?
Yes, I did.
Good.
I think there were moments, like we say, where it's a little slow. But generally, I think that just because of the insanity of the characters and the complete horror of the situation, I think it's very easy to see why it's considered so influential.
It's actually credited it as being the first horror movie, slasher movie, to have the sort of hulking brute archetype as its main villain. Yeah. And also, of course, with being the first slasher film to use sort of power tools as the central weapon. Although, interestingly, only one person gets killed with a chainsaw.
It's Franklin, yeah. Leatherface does get his leg cut by himself, but no one else killed by it.
No, but it's the sound of it and everything is central, I think, to...
yeah, that gets a bit annoying, doesn't it? Well, grating, at least, is all you hear for, like, 2/3 of the film is the sound of a chainsaw.
Chattering engine. But what's quite interesting, I thought, was the soundtrack is a lot of sort of ambient noises and things. There's very rarely, like, any sort of intense, like, string stabs or anything like that to punctuate, like, bits of violence or impacts or anything like that, or jump scares. It's just sort of like, it was made from noises that you get in a slaughterhouse. Yeah. Early on in the film, they drive past a slaughterhouse on the motorway, and the hitchhiker they pick up, who is obviously later revealed to be part of this weird. Are they cannibalistic family? Yes. Or are they? I think I think it's implied that the barbecue they're cooking is people. Exactly. Yeah. This weird sort of butcher family. Yeah. He has an obsession with sort of, he's got Polaroids of corpses and things like that as well. Like I feel like the film's characters, like the protagonists and antagonists, and the sort of aesthetic of the film, all give it like a sort of sickly tone the whole way through. Like none of the characters are very like endearing or sort of...
It's gritty.
Yeah, it's like quite unpleasant the whole way through. Like, and I think Franklin especially sort of treads into the realm of sort of exploitation, sort of horror.
Yeah.
You know, because he's in a wheelchair and
exactly.
a lot is made of his sort of disability.
Vulnerability.
The opening narration refers to him as an invalid, which is obviously a sign of the times.
Yeah, but exactly. It sets him apart immediately as having that vulnerability, I guess.
But I think like it feels like a dirty, sort of grimy...
It's always very easy to say that it did come from that grindhouse, video nasty B-movie sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it did get a mainstream release generally, I think. It obviously was banned in a lot of places.
Yeah,
Britain,
banned in here until 1999.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it was released, at least, it had a distribution in America.
Sure.
I don't know how wide that was, whether some states banned it, but it probably was the first horror of its nature to have that.
I mean, a lot of the grindhouse horror elements that are in this film may well have originated from this film because it's so influential. And I think like all the violence in the film is very sudden and very brutal, and it's not like in Friday the 13th there's a lot of sort of, I know we keep referring to Friday the 13th, but we pair these films because they're roughly sort of similar. But there's a lot of sort of injury detail and like unusual ways of people being killed. The arrow through the neck under the bed, and being cut in half and strung from the ceiling and all that sort of thing. There's none of that with this film really. It's all just sort of quite perfunctory horror,
it's like
violence.
It's more, what if you got in a way of someone who's far, far stronger than you and doesn't mind killing you.
And wants to kill you instantly. And like, so, we'll talk about a couple of scenes in particular, which I think show this a bit later. And also Leatherface, I think, is genuinely terrifying. Yeah,
because there is a bit of raw emotion from him. He's shown like kind of crying about what he's doing. He's like just confused and overwhelmed by everything. So, I mean, it's obvious that this is a house where abuse takes place of various kinds.
Yeah.
And like you don't feel like it's just like an exploitation, like everyone's crazy here. You feel like there's genuine human emotion there. Which is, it's hard to explain because on one hand you could say, oh, they're just hillbilly horror, but then you go, well, actually there's something more to it.
There's a depth there that's maybe not explored in the film, but it seems like it's there.
I know in the remake they make it so that he has like a motive, which is like he was bullied as a child, and it has flashbacks to Leatherface being bullied. It's kind of like you're missing the point.
Yeah,
he's just meant on the one hand he is just meant to be this like unknown phantom ghoul who just attacks everyone that comes near him.
Yeah,
and you don't really need to know why.
No. Yeah, he is sort of like, as you say, like a phantom, like a sort of weird anomaly sort of person. Like, I'm sure. No doubt in later films in the series when they're struggling for ideas, it turns out he's like possessed by something, or you know what I mean? Like as always is the way. But I think he's like, you can see why the film is so influential and so iconic, because he is like a very simple. I mean, like he's not iconic in the way that Jason Voorhees is, because you can literally draw like a hockey mask and people know who you're talking about. But he is like a very scary and quite unique villain and monster.
No, I agree, yeah. Something about Leatherface, I have a question. So when they're at dinner, he's wearing makeup?
Yeah.
Is that because he's put makeup on his existing Leatherface, or because he's skinned one of the girls there and is wearing their face?
Oh, God. I assume he's taking on a sort of matriarchal role, like at the dinner table. Because there's the father figure, grandfather, father, and brother, and either mother or sister. But there's some, like you say, it's not given a reason, which is good. Like it's not like the old man, as he's credited, or the cook or
proprietor,
the proprietor of the gas station. It's never really like touched upon. You never get that scene where they go, oh, the reason Leatherface is wearing a mask made out of people's skin is because this. I mean, obviously you get it in the remake. Yeah. Or maybe that's not exactly the case.
There's no attempt to explain the madness.
Yeah.
You have to either take it as implied from the fact that he lives in an abusive atmosphere, or that he's just mental because he's an inbred cannibal, or there's any number of reasons, and it doesn't matter.
No,
anyway.
It's like quite a nihilistic sort of view of the world, isn't it? Like, there are just people. It's almost like it's just going, oh, there are just people who are like this.
Yes,
It's like you can't hope to explain it.
Yeah,
I think the ending's really good as well. Obviously, Sally manages to escape, but it's obviously caused her some sort of mental
breakdown.
Yeah. But the final shot of Leatherface sort of swinging his chainsaw like impotently in the middle of the street with the sun coming down as well.
He's kind of dancing, isn't he?
Yeah, there's something really like haunting about it. Like I think there's something weirdly a lot more. It stays with you a lot more than if it he left, or if she looked back and he was gone, or any of the other sort of horror ending tropes.
Anyone grunting, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's almost like because it just cuts abruptly. It's like it's just. It's still going on. Yeah. Like he's still out there, and it's still going on. You could be the next.
The madness is still there.
Yeah, you could be the next people who stumble into him.
The first people he attacks.
Yeah,
Kirk and Pam. But you're not going to stand a chance against him. I think that's established.
Yeah, well, I think this is a good example of when I was talking about the violence being really sudden and really brutal. Like Kirk, there's no opportunity for him to defend himself or put up a fight. And I think this is one of the iconic scenes from this film. Like whenever you see the polls of 100 scariest horror movie moments or whatever, this is the one from this film that comes up quite often.
Just Leatherface pops up and smacks him on the head.
Because there's been no indication that Leatherface even exists. Imagine watching this film like cold, not knowing anything about it in 1974, and you're thinking, oh, it's a bit creepy and everything, that maybe that hitchhiker's going to come back. And then just out of nowhere, like a 7-foot man with like a meat tenderizer or a sledgehammer just appears.
It caves in one of the main characters' heads.
And it's pretty horrible. And like he's like writhing on the floor, like having a seizure on the floor, and then he gets like another blow to the head, and then dragged off, and the door slams shut. And it's the whole scene takes place in probably 5 or 6 seconds. It's pretty horrible. And then obviously Pam as well.
Oh, she gets impaled on the meat hook. Which is there's a good way to make someone seem helpless, and that is it.
Like it's visceral in the sense that you can imagine, you get an idea of what that might be like in a very horrible way. And also I think that the moment where Kirk gets killed is significant because again it doesn't have any sort of musical, like bang, like jump scare music.
No.
And I think it's just like here is a man, and bang, this character is now dead. It's very grounded. It's abrupt.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we can take from this scene though is that you should run away from strange slaughterhouse skull rooms if you see them, because Kirk walks in and it seems like he's drawn to the curio of a room that appears to be full of skulls. Like I mean, in a lot of these films, I know we're not really supposed to, when we're talking about how to survive, go, oh well, I just wouldn't go in there or whatever. I wouldn't go in there.
No,
definitely not.
But would you ever go in someone's house without being asked in?
Definitely not in Texas, where, as I understand it, most of them own guns.
Loaded.
Doesn't Texas have the rule about like you can your home is your castle as well?
Yes. I think it's called the castle doctrine or something.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Just don't go into someone's house unless you're invited in, because you end up with a bullet in the head, or you end up with Leatherface killing you.
Yeah. I mean, the best they could have hoped for was that it was empty, basically.
Yeah. And there's not much to gain from that.
Another scene that was quite effective, I thought, was the bit where Sally and Franklin are going through the woods.
Right.
And it's pitch black, and Leatherface just sort of lunges out of the dark, out of nowhere, which is pretty intense,
startling.
And it's like obviously the tension is building as they're trying to make their way through the woods and stuff.
Yeah, don't push your wheelchair through the undergrowth.
Well, this is what I was going to say. It's like, what do you do with Franklin? If you're in Sally's position, what do you do? It's difficult, isn't it? Because you can't, in terms of net survival for the group.
Yeah. And he does keep saying, I want to come with you.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can go, no, you wait here. You're just abandoning him.
And also, it's probably not fair to leave him on his own either.
But you don't know everyone's dead at that point.
That's true, but at best you might succumb to you might succumb to whatever's happened to the rest of the group,
and then he's next.
Yeah, or if it's like they've all fallen into quicksand or whatever, then he's just left in a van on his own forever.
Yeah, that's true. It's a bit of a conundrum. The Franklin conundrum, as it will hereafter be known. So something that is going to impact on your survival, but you need to actually go through in order to survive.
Yeah, but also like you got to, when we talk about how to survive, are we talking solely about one character's survival? Or
I think rule 4 of our rules is that you have to, unless otherwise stated, try and save the people around you.
Sure.
Not to be a hero, but because that's what you would do. You can't abandon family members, for instance.
No, exactly. I guess not. But she might have thought she was coming back though, so it may not have been abandoning per se.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a tricky one. But like definitely, wheelchair in the woods was a bad idea. Anyway.
Yeah, I think he was a goner as soon as they did set foot in the woods.
Yeah, it was never going to end well for him. It's also quite a frightening scene in terms of how close up you see Leatherface.
Yeah,
because it's we've watched so many horror films and slasher films now, and most of the good ones, we say, oh, it's really good because they don't show the monster or the villain for like ages or barely at all. But this is the opposite, and yet it works just as well.
It's almost like he feels the screen. Because he's so intense and so forceful and strong.
Yeah,
that's what's scary.
Yeah, and he's a horrific like vision. Yeah, which is quite an effective scene. Sally is actually quite sensible though. Like in a lot of films, what's the one thing that we tell people to do? Like in terms of survival tactics, what's one thing that always is going to give you a semblance of a chance?
Run.
Yeah. Run as fast as you can.
Do you know what's weird? So earlier when Pam is in the room with all the furniture made from human bones, I was thinking, what will be interesting in this film or any horror film is if she just jumped headfirst through the window. Just fucking headfirst out the window. And then later on, Sally does exactly that. Yeah. And I was like, that's amazing.
And she does it again later on in the film when she escapes from the dinner scene.
So that's exactly how you should do things. Caution to the wind, headfirst out the window. What's the worst that could happen?
Sally's got a very strong survival instinct, I'd say. In terms of all of the final survivors of all the slasher films we've covered, all the horror films, she's probably one of the most hardy.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. And then of course there's the dinner scene, which is it's where the film like goes over the edge in terms of like how disturbing it is.
Up until now it's been like, oh no, this should be bad if that happened to you, and now it's like, well, this is probably the weirdest movie of its time. I mean, like, this is the first time I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I now realise that the central scene in the film that we covered a long time ago, The Loved Ones, is almost certainly influenced by this.
Like quite strongly. I mean, there's even the bit where she wakes up and she's tied to the chair around the dinner table. She starts screaming, and they all just scream with her. And it's like they're going, you can scream what you like. There's no one coming. There's no one going to hear you.
We enjoy it.
Yeah. And they're like, I think there's something really terrifying about like the family finding it funny, like in films like this where the villain and also like a twisted family unit is something that you get in quite a lot of horror films, and it's always like effective because there's some sort of like really deeply disturbing.
It's kind of like the horror or the horrifying elements are bred into all of them.
It's something like quite insipid and quite like ingrained about everything that's really horrible about it when it's like in a family setting. And I guess it's also because it's like, reworking something that's familiar to everyone. Yeah,
exactly. We've all got a family, but very few of our listeners probably share cannibal meals with their family. But you never know.
Yeah. But they go like off the chain, like unhinged at this point. And then I think also this is where Sally loses her mind as well.
Yeah.
There's actually quite a good sequence, I thought, which is where there are sort of jump cuts between her screaming, and it's like from different angles and things like that. Yeah. And it is like her having a proper mental breakdown.
I think that part, I mean, I remember reading that Ridley Scott said he was influenced by this film for Alien, which sounds like a kind of weird thing because Aliens was very different to this.
Yeah.
But that shot in particular it reminded me of Ripley when she's kind of go screaming, or the aliens creeping up on her. It's the close up under her face.
Yeah. With the flashing light.
Yeah,
as well,
exactly.
yeah.
It's very much like that.
Yeah, well, it's like quite fast cutting, and you get like super close ups of like her eyes and all that sort of thing. I thought it was really well done, and it's also like a sort of editing style that you not only don't see much at this stage in cinema, but especially not in sort of independent cinema, not high budget, not like a particularly named director, especially not at the time.
Grisly horror movie as well.
Yeah, like it's a pretty interesting, like artistic scene.
Yeah.
That's really effective, I think, as a horror scene.
Agreed.
So, what would you say you knew about Leatherface at this stage?
We don't even really know his name. I mean, Leatherface is the name given to him by the fans. Isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, he's credited as Leatherface, but no one ever calls him "Hello, Mr. Leatherface." So,
of course.
But that's not important. What we know about the character of Leatherface is he's pretty much willing to kill anyone.
Yeah.
For whatever reasons. For private reasons.
Yeah. I mean, he seems to be sort of underdeveloped in terms of his intellect.
Yeah.
Like to the point of being sort of disabled.
Yes.
Like what I thought was quite interesting is obviously the family dynamic is never like properly established, but you suggested that the shop owner, the petrol station owner, might be the father of Leatherface and the hitchhiker.
I think so, yeah.
He does take on like a sort of, fatherly
He's bossing
role.
him around and get your grandfather down here.
Exactly, yeah. And he says to the hitchhiker, you're not supposed to leave your brother alone. So it's like, he's having to have other people like
make sure Leatherface doesn't kill people.
Exactly, yeah. Like it's a pretty disturbing.
This is the last thing we wanted to happen.
Yeah, this is like 25 years into Leatherface's like
murderous
spree.
But I guess he's very strong as well, and seemingly very fast. Although not. I mean, I'm aware from reading about it that I know Gunnar Hansen, who plays Leatherface, has said that he had to deliberately slow down running because even carrying the chainsaw and wearing weightlifting boots, he was still able to keep up with Sally as she escaped. But that's not what he's portrayed as. He's portrayed as being quite lumbering and slow.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about slow though, because he is able to keep up with her the whole time. Yeah. Like he's within sort of 5 or 10 feet of her.
He doesn't catch her, does he?
No, I guess not. But you wouldn't like stop either.
No, true.
It's not far enough away for you to feel comfortable.
No.
But he's a pretty terrifying prospect.
True.
Especially when we're talking about how we'd survive, Joe. And I'd say that this is maybe the toughest slasher situation we've found ourselves in yet. Yeah,
just because, I mean, it's the same thing as we feared we might have with Friday the 13th originally, which was, if you don't know you're about to be killed, there's very little you can do. Yeah. And that's what happens with most of them, is they just get overwhelmed very quickly.
I mean, Kirk, Pam, Jerry and Franklin are all killed within about 2 seconds of being discovered by Leatherface or like seeing Leatherface. The exception is Pam, but she's lifted up off the floor and there's no way that she'd ever hope to get out of it, basically.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Like in a clutch, which then has her impaled on a meat hook, so it's...
There's no way out for her, basically.
No, exactly. So yeah, I think that makes it tough, sure.
I mean, what you were saying about not going into people's homes out of both politeness and a fear for personal safety, in a general sense, is good. Yeah. Because they wouldn't have got themselves into this situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you don't be so nosy.
Yeah. But I mean, once they've crossed the threshold, there's very little that they can do other than exactly what Sally does: leap out of windows and run for it. Yeah. And even, Sally gets really lucky anyway that there's a truck and then a pickup truck passing.
Yeah. There's been no cars on that road that we've noticed before.
No.
So that could be the first in days. Yeah. Lucky indeed. Here's a first idea for survival.
Sure.
You drive, right? Mm-hmm. You've driven a lot. How long?
God, like 7, 8 years.
Yeah. You drive around cities.
I have done.
You've driven in the country.
Yeah.
If you had to estimate, how many miles do you think you've done?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe like 5,000. Okay. I don't know.
We live in London, so you don't drive now, so that accounts for... Have you ever picked up a hitchhiker? Not once. If you saw someone who had their thumb out, would you pick them up?
Well, if I was someone who would pick up a hitchhiker, Joe, there's one very simple test that I would run in my brain before picking them up, and that is the hitchhiker covered in blood or not?
Yeah. That's step one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Step two is, do they have a look in their eye, which suggests that they've been unhinged for some years?
Yeah, even if they don't. You know, there's no telling whether or not they're a sociopath or a psychopath or whatever. So it's a risky proposition anyway. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know. I've never picked up a hitchhiker. I've never even been inclined to pick up a hitchhiker.
No.
In fact, I've driven past people I know and not offered them a lift.
Yeah. I think it's a bad idea, generally.
Yeah. And this one, as soon as they knew he was a bit shifty, I mean, he stunk the place out, they could have just pulled over and gone, get out. Which they do anyway.
Eventually. Not only after he
mutilates someone.
Yeah.
And himself.
After he did that, I'd be like, get out.
Yeah.
Because if you're hurting yourself, then you're probably going to hurt other people.
Yeah, you're not stable.
Yeah.
You'd have sex.
Recognising unstable personality types should be a How to Survive staple.
Yeah. Toxic people.
Yeah.
There are traits, like, look in someone's eyes, if they can't hold your gaze for 5 seconds without lashing out at you, then they are not to be trusted.
All themselves.
Yeah. Interesting. I don't think in this movie they once telephone for a policeman.
No, that's true.
Or policewoman.
Yeah, they do say that the one place that Sally goes to, which is the gas station, he says that there is no phone there.
Right.
I mean, obviously it turns out that he's lying anyway.
He's perhaps the father of the cannibal family.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you've got enough petrol to get somewhere. In Texas, I looked this up, it is illegal to hitchhike.
Okay.
A person may not stand in a roadway to solicit a ride, contribution, employment or business from an occupant of a vehicle.
Okay.
Unless they're working for a charity, basically.
Okay.
And it's code 552007, solicitation by pedestrians. So go to the police in any way you can. I mean, even drive to a police station, drive to anywhere with the phone.
Yeah.
There's a hitchhiker out there. He's trying to hitchhike. He's trying to solicit transport.
Yeah.
Illegally.
Yeah.
They'd be on the scene like that. They're busybodies in these small towns, hayseed cops.
Yeah.
They'd be out there. They'd run him in.
Yeah.
Leaving Leatherface vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because he's without people to kill, he's not going to,
But then, the police would presumably look up his address, do a follow-up, maybe try and get in touch with his family. The whole Leatherface situation could unravel completely.
Yeah, exactly. So it all starts with a basic awareness of vagrancy laws.
Yeah. The highway code. Yeah. Well, I had one idea. We said earlier the chainsaw, despite it being, in the name of the film, is only used to kill one person, in actual fact. But given that it's, so intrinsically linked with the film, I thought it best to discuss some ideas about how to protect yourself from chainsaw.
Right.
Okay. So the first is that a couple of facts about chainsaws. They spin at between 10 and 14,000 RPM, which obviously, with all the blades, means that it can tear through basically anything, as we see in the film, apart from the metal door of the lorry, of course. Yeah. But lumberjacks, who use chainsaws all the time, obviously, they have special safety gear, which is a sort of chainmail type thing, which
just
they
in
wear.
Case of slippage.
Exactly, in case they do what Leatherface does in the film and accidentally cut one of their legs.
Yes.
So, you could. I mean, let's be fair and say that the people in this film were not anticipating a chainsaw attack. But were you in a situation where you were anticipating a chainsaw attack? For example, maybe a police officer who is going to investigate the house on the Sally's.
Or as soon as you know there's a chainsaw in play.
Yeah,
perhaps you could look to this.
There is basically chainsaw safety wear. A much better idea that I think is more within the reach of the average person and easier to prepare for is that just practice cardio.
Right.
Do the work and get yourself into a state where you're fit enough to run fast for 20 minutes. Right? It's not that long. It's it would be a a struggle for you initially, but after training, and it's a good way to be anyway. To be in a rude state of health.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason for this is that chainsaw consumes fuel at a rate of 1 pint per 10 to 15 minutes. And the average fuel tank for a chainsaw is about 700 millilitres, meaning that if you could run for approximately 20 minutes, you should outlast the petrol that's in the tank of the chainsaw.
I'll stop you there, Chris.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting that we both arrived at the same conclusion.
Yeah.
Well, unsurprisingly, my research a little more thorough.
Really?
Yeah. So the chainsaw used in the film is the Poulan 245A.
Okay.
With a fuel capacity of 18 fluid ounces, which is 0.14 litres. Very low end.
That's very low.
Yeah. Now, I couldn't find the exact fuel burning rate, but compare this with the Husqvarna, which is made by the same people. The Husqvarna 455 burns through 1 gallon every 3 hours. That's a modern chainsaw with a fuel capacity of 0.44 litres and a maximum RPM of 9,000.
Okay.
The Poulan, which is the one in the film, has a max RPM of only 6,500, meaning it's 38% less powerful than the Husqvarna.
Okay.
Now, if you adjust the fuel burning capacity by 38%, and it is depending on whether Leatherface is running it at full power for the whole thing, I estimate between 3 and 36 minutes, depending on the amount of fuel left in the chainsaw at the beginning of the chase.
Okay.
So
if you can run a 10k basically,
yes,
without stopping, you're in you may have a good chance.
Yeah, just run.
I think all of my points still apply.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And if anything, it's safer to overestimate the power and ability of the
air on the side of caution. Go for the 36 minutes option.
Yeah.
Because then you're still putting more distance between.
Exactly. Yeah.
Also, on the subject of the Poulan 245A, I've actually printed out the owner manual.
Okay.
It says safety first.
Sure.
Don't use the saw when you're tired.
Okay.
You don't know if Leatherface. We don't know his sort of fatigue.
So is this how to survive from the perspective of Leatherface?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Or maybe, from Leatherface.
Okay, from the user.
Yeah,
we don't discriminate. Like they should. Everyone should have an equal chance.
Don't start cutting until you have a clear work area, secure footing, and a planned retreat from a falling tree.
Okay.
He's running that chainsaw in
and around the house.
Yeah.
And running with it.
Yeah. Don't touch a moving chain. He does that with his leg, his thigh.
That's true, yeah. A famously non-chainsaw proof part of the body.
Yeah. Don't use the saw in an enclosed area. Which he does. He does that repeatedly throughout the film. Wear safe footwear. Fine.
Touch and go.
Yeah. Be careful handling fuel. We don't see him handling fuel. But we can't make any assumptions, that's fine. Hold the saw firmly with both hands. Now, waving it around his head, isn't he?
Yeah.
At the end there?
At the end of the film, he's practically juggling with it, which is famously a bad thing to be doing with a chainsaw.
Keep the chain out of the dirt. Even a small amount of dirt can clog the chain quickly. Okay. Which could be a potential idea for Sally.
Okay.
If she was able to pick up a pile of clods of earth and sort of pack them as fast as you can into the mechanism before it has a chance to cut your fingers off.
Okay. Well, the one issue with that is that even if the chainsaw stopped rotating, I would estimate that Leatherface probably would easily bludgeon you to death with just the static blades.
Yes, that's true.
So basically, I wouldn't make that your primary goal.
It's just going to come down to it, I think.
Yeah. If it's coming to that, I think you're in trouble.
My final thought for how to survive. This is based on an exchange between Sally and Franklin. Franklin says, "Sally," and Sally says, "What now?" And Franklin says, "Nothing. Never mind." And there's a few other things Franklin says, mostly about, "Oh, you only brought me along because you feel sorry for me," and "Oh, I'm just weighing you down. I'm holding you back. You can't have fun with me here." Other things like that, right?
Yeah.
And Sally just getting more and more annoyed. So I'm saying, safety in numbers. We need friends here, not enemies. Emotional intelligence, Chris.
Yeah.
Recognise what other people are feeling, and to help us out here, I've looked to an old friend of ours.
Okay.
WikiHow.
Okay.
So, WikiHow, once again, they've been in touch. Resurrecting
a favourite trope of the How to Survive series.
Number 1, be open-minded and agreeable. Openness and being agreeable go hand in hand when it comes to emotional intelligence, and narrow mind is generally an indication of lower EQ. So, bipping at people and complaining if they are showing general emotion themselves, not a good idea. 2, improve your empathy skills. Empathy means being able to recognise how other people are feeling and share emotions with them. And really paying attention to what people are saying can get you a better sense of how they're feeling. Not something that Sally does.
No.
Number 3, read people's body language. Make a point of trying to read between the lines and pick up on people's true feelings.
Sure.
Number 4, see the effect you have on others. Understanding other people's emotions is only half the battle when it comes to EQ. You also need to understand the effect you're having on other people. And 5, practice being emotionally honest. If you say you're fine and you have a scowl on your face, you're not communicating honestly. To practice being honest with your emotions. And
I'd say they're brother and sister, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. You would think after a lifetime of living together they would have got a good read of each other's emotions.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah.
But apparently not here.
Well, unless it's just that they have an antagonistic relationship anyway.
Do
you know what I mean?
Even then, you don't need that.
But then, isn't that changing the motivations of the characters? Maybe they don't want to like one another. Franklin is seen in the lower floors of their dilapidated homestead, sort of
mocking her.
Yeah, blowing raspberries at the rest of the crowd who are upstairs having fun.
I think that's more that he's being left out and she's not recognising.
Yeah, but it seems like it's an ongoing issue for him. It's like reflective of an ongoing
because she's
struggle.
never once paid attention to him.
Well, maybe.
I'd also say this emotional intelligence can be applied to Leatherface, who we see have an emotional breakdown. He's I can't believe I'm killing these people. Didn't say that, but he's crying,
head in his hands.
Yeah, and he's trying to have dinners. He's dressed up nice for his family, and they're calling him an idiot. They're being horrible. All I'm saying is a bit of
TLC,
a bit of EQ. Sit down. Whoa, how was your day? It was fine, thanks. How are you feeling, Leatherface?
Yeah.
I'm not feeling good. I'll tell you why. People came in here and I've accidentally killed them.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? To be honest with you, now you've asked me, I think
I'm really cut up about it.
I am cut up about it, and here's why.
Yeah.
I was venting and I've gone too far.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I could share this with you, my family. But instead, he's got, you goddamn idiot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a very stable family unit.
No.
Maybe that's why. Maybe that's the answer to Leatherface's. It's nurture, not nature.
Yeah. So you're saying that
Leatherface is a product of his environment.
Yeah. Like we all.
Food for thought, indeed.
Yep. Food for thought until next week, when we'll be talking about
Bone Tomahawk, the 2015 horror western.
Nice. And that's followed the following week by The Revenant.
Yes.
A movie that I've been looking forward to for about 6 months, I think. Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hardy. What more could you ask for?
Nothing.
So if you have thoughts on how to survive in Bone Tomahawk or The Revenant, or you want to get in touch with ideas, here's something I've been meaning to ask you, listener. Do you prefer it when we do the more mainstream horrors, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or when we do the more esoteric ones, the more horror fan-focused ones, like Backcountry, or It Follows, or The Loved Ones? I'd be really interested in knowing whether you want to do more of those, or more classics, like perhaps The Poseidon Adventure, or The Tower Inferno.
Yeah.
Or Chris's favourite movie, The Minions.
It's just Minions, mate.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. You're the expert.
Well, I am, yeah. You subscribe to my other podcast, Minions.
Minion Watch. If you've enjoyed the show, leave us a 5-star review.
Of course.
On iTunes or SoundCloud or whatever device or software you're using to hear it. And get in touch. We do want to hear from you. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks very much for listening. Next week it is Bone Tomahawk. So watch it and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, buzz off.
I have one.
You have one?
Yeah. Chris, turn the mics off. Cost of electricity is enough to drive a man out of business. or Chris's favourite movie, The Minions.
It's just Minions, mate.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. You're the expert.
Well, I am, yeah. You subscribe to my other podcast, Minions.
Minion Watch.
Yeah.
You make those. You make those things on Facebook.
That's actually my job. I get paid a lot of money for that.
Yeah.
Doing the if you see any of my Minion memes, minionmemes.com.
Yeah. Send them over.
Well, no, I don't need any more.
I don't need. I'm gonna send them to How to Survive show.
Look, they might look like they're cobbled together, but actually, I put a lot of work in them, and
Yeah.
I actually think you're disrespecting my art.
I was meaning to ask you about one of them.
Okay, go on.
It said, it was one. It said something like, "I'm the crazy aunt that your kids love."
Yeah.
And it was a minion dressed as Ned Flanders.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering what's the connection?
Well, I mean, obviously, an aunt for many people is not necessarily like a familial figure.
No.
For a lot of people, it's just sort of like a person in their lives who, maybe it's like a family friend or something like that, who is, like there's an element of parental guidance there.
Sure.
But also, a bit more free, a bit more fun, okay? And I think Ned Flanders, though, he's supposedly, the man representative of sort of a bit of a square,
right, yeah.
That sort of thing. He's a beloved character, and one that you might not take everything he says and accept it, and it doesn't feel like a father or anything to you personally, but you can learn a lot from him, and I think that's very representative of what that meme was trying to say. And also, of course, I don't want to subscribe to gender normative roles.
No, of course.
So I'm never governed by male or female traditional values and ideas in terms of the Minion memes.
So the Minion memes are really all inclusive.
Absolutely, yeah.
Representative of all areas of society.
I think we can all learn a lot from Minions.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because they are a blank canvas onto which we can project,
our own identities.
Yeah, from all walks of life and all directions. You've got the yellow one, you've got the one that's got a bit more hair, there's the one that's got one eye instead of two, and then there's the purple one with the hair.
And they work bananas.
I mean, who doesn't like bananas? Potassium.
Yeah. Is it part of the Minion makeup that they have to like bananas?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of schools of thought on this.
Right.
Obviously, they're yellow, which is the colour of bananas.
Yes.
There is a suggestion that because we never actually see them eating bananas.
Okay.
We see one of them wearing a banana hat.
Okay.
And it may be that somewhere in the annals of Minion culture, they look up to bananas as a form of...
As a god?
Yeah, well, not necessarily as the god isn't within the banana,
right.
But the banana is an iconographic symbol that is representative of the deity that governs their existence by their own estimation. The other school of thought is that obviously Minions are yellow, bananas are yellow. Minions...
Both slippery.
Yeah, they do eat. It could be that they eat so many bananas that their yellowness comes from it.
You are what you eat.
Exactly, and the purple one, for example, is one seen within the Minion fan culture as being one that's very much rejecting Minion values.
He eats aubergine.
Well, he I don't think it's covered in the canon text.
And what would you dress him as if he was going to be in a meme?
Well, of course, he's the more anarchic, sort of chaotic Minion. So, I mean, he's very much, you use him for your sort of rebellious memes, the ones where you're, maybe being like softly anti-establishment.
So something like, if you bring my daughter home late, you better know I have a gun ready.
No, it's more like because I'm not a fan of that sort of whole gendered violence angle. That's not really the direction that I like to.
That's not what Minions are about.
No, it's more like sort of. I think one of my most shared ones was a picture of the purple Minion. I think one of my most shared pieces of artwork was the purple Minion. This is the most self-indulgent ending to a podcast we've ever done.
I want to finish it.